Beneath the silence of an old school corridor, one forbidden mirror hides a terror that never stopped watching. Never look into the mirror in the school bathroom is a chilling supernatural horror story about a cursed reflection, a dead schoolgirl, and a haunting presence that follows anyone who dares to look back. If you love psychological horror, haunted schools, ghost legends, and deeply disturbing stories that stay with you long after midnight, this nightmare will leave you afraid of every mirror you pass. No one knows exactly what year that story began, and no one remembers who was the first to whisper it in the schoolyard. It is only known that for a very long time, at Hongvan High School, whenever gloomy days came, whenever afternoon rain dragged the skies so low that even the almond trees in the yard turned black as if they had been smoked, the students would whisper to one another about one thing that everyone pretended not to believe. Yet no one dared to test. That you must never step into the girls' bathroom at the end of Building C after school hours. And if you happened to step inside, then under no circumstances should you look up at the mirror hanging above the wash basin. Because once something in the mirror looked back at you, from that night on, you would no longer fully belong to this world. Hongvan High School was an old school, so old that the yellowed walls always felt damp from the inside, as if the layer of limewash outside was only skin, and behind it was an aged body slowly rotting away. Building C was the oldest block, built in the days when classrooms still had high ceilings, thick wooden doors, long endless corridors, and patterned tile floors worn smooth by decades of students' shoes scraping across them. In daylight, the place only seemed sad and cold, but when the sunlight died, the whole building seemed to sink into a heavy, suffocating silence, like the feeling of accidentally walking into a room where someone had just died and everyone had hurriedly cleaned it up to pretend nothing had ever happened. The high window panes were dim with dust. The fluorescent lights flickered without rhythm, and the wind threading through the cracks sounded like someone breathing softly inside your throat. Especially the girls' bathroom on the third floor, the deepest, darkest, most hidden corner of Building C, with its green painted door peeling in flakes, its rusted hinges, and inside, the stale smell of old water mixed with a strange unpleasant odor, like the smell of wet hair left too long in darkness. My name is Lin, a student in class 1183. If it had been before everything happened, I would have been the kind of person who laughed first at school ghost stories. I did not believe in things people could not prove. I hated the way people passed around vague tales just to frighten others. Every time my classmates talked about ghosts on the rooftop, footsteps in the laboratory, or a figure at the end of the corridor, I could always find some reason to dismiss it. To me, fear was usually just a kind of contagion. The more people believed in it, the more real it seemed. I used to think the story about the mirror in the school bathroom was the same. Just an old, meaningless rumor, patched together by generations of students to kill time. Until I heard the first knocking sound. It happened in late October, during the rainy season, when darkness came very quickly and the last light of day always went out as if someone had pressed a black hand over the sun. That day my class had an extra lesson in the afternoon. By the time it ended, the schoolyard had already turned the gray color of rainwater, and the wind along the corridor carried the sharp smell of wet soil. I was packing my bag when I remembered I had left my notebook in the study room on the third floor of Building C. I could have left it until the next morning. But we had a test the day after, so I had to go back for it. The moment I stepped onto the staircase of Building C, I already felt uneasy. Not because I was thinking about the rumors, but because there had always been something about that block that made people unconsciously want to walk faster. The staircase was narrow and dark, every step hollowed in the middle, the walls blotched with damp stains like old handprints pressed from inside. There was no one at all on the third floor. The classroom doors were shut tight, and the glass panels in them reflected the dim gray of the evening like dead fish eyes. I found my notebook quickly enough, but when I stepped back into the corridor, I heard a very faint sound. Knock. I froze. It did not sound like a door banging in the wind, nor like dripping water. It sounded exactly like a fingertip tapping against glass. Slow, soft, but far too distinct to mistake. Knock. This time, I heard it coming from the end of the corridor, from the direction of the girls' bathroom. In that instant, an old sentence leapt into my mind as if someone had just whispered it beside my ear. Do not look into the mirror. I hated that feeling, so I tried to brush it off immediately. Maybe there was still some student who had not gone home yet. Or maybe the janitor was cleaning. I told myself that, but my palms had already begun to grow cold. I walked a few more steps toward the end of the corridor and called out to ask if anyone was there. No answer came. There was only the shriek of wind through the windows and the sound. Knock. Knock. More regular now. More patient, like someone who knew for certain I would come. I did not go all the way there. The moment I stood only a few meters from the bathroom door, I suddenly heard a long breath right behind my neck. That breath was cold and damp, so close that I felt as though someone had pressed their face against my back. I spun around. The corridor was empty, but when I looked back at the bathroom door, I saw it had opened a crack at some point, and inside the darkness there was a dull gray shine reflected like dirty water. I ran. That night, lying in bed, I still thought I had only made myself nervous from hearing too many ghost stories. But close to 2 in the morning, I was woken by that exact same sound. Knock. The round mirror on my study table opposite the bed was completely dark, reflecting only a faint patch of street light from outside the window. I lay still, my heart pounding so hard that my chest hurt. Knock. Knock. The tapping came from the surface of the mirror. Not from the wall, not from the window, from the mirror itself. I pulled the blanket over my head like a child and curled up rigid, listening to the tapping continue for a few minutes before it stopped. The next morning, I laughed at myself, but when I stood brushing my teeth in the bathroom and looked up at the mirror, I suddenly had the feeling that my reflection moved a fraction of a beat slower. Just for a moment, only like a mistimed blink. In reality, I had already lifted my head, but in the mirror my head rose after it. The sensation passed so quickly that I could not be sure I had really seen it. But from that moment on, a cold fear like rainwater began to seep into me little by little. The person who told me the most about the mirror was Han. My classmate. Han sat in front of me. She was the kind of girl who was easily frightened but irresistibly drawn to terrifying stories like a moth to flame. When she saw how pale I was, She immediately pulled me to the corner of the corridor and asked if I had heard the knocking in Building C. I asked how she knew. Han did not answer at once, only looked around as though afraid someone might overhear, then began to tell me in a much lower voice. According to Han, the mirror story was not groundless rumor. Many years ago, a female student had died in the last stall of the third-floor bathroom in Building C. No one could say clearly whether it had been suicide or murder. It was only known that when people broke down the stall door, the girl was already dead, her eyes wide open as if they might burst out, her face turned toward the mirror outside. At that time the mirror had been covered in black smudged handprints layered one over another from inside the glass, as though something or someone had been clawing desperately to come out. After that death, the school had intended to remove the mirror, but those who touched it met with one misfortune after another. One fell and broke an arm, one burned with fever and raved for 3 days. And a night guard who moved the mirror to the storage room was found drowned in the water tank the next morning. His eyes rolled white and his mouth full of tiny shards of glass. I told Han to stop making things up, but my throat had gone dry. Han looked straight at me and whispered that the most terrifying thing was not the death from that year, but what happened to those who later saw the shadow in the mirror. They all began the same way. They heard knocking at night. After that, they saw a female student in an old uniform standing behind them in every reflective surface. Mirrors, phone screens, glass windows, metal spoons, even the pupils of other people's eyes. When she appeared more clearly, it meant she was coming closer. And at some point, the person she had chosen would return to that bathroom as if called there. And then they would no longer be themselves. What Han said should have made me stay away from Building C from that day forward. But people are foolish in this way. The more afraid they are, the more they want to know. I told Nam, my close friend, about it. Nam was the kind of boy who liked to act fearless. The more forbidden something was, the more he wanted to try it. After hearing me out, he did not laugh at me. He only asked, "Do you dare go back there again?" I shook my head at once. Nam said, "It's only because we let this stuff get into our heads that we're afraid. We go up there, look once, and then it's over." I did not want to go. But for the next 2 days, the knocking in the mirror at home kept returning in the middle of the night. Not often, not for long, just enough to let me know I was not imagining it. By Friday afternoon, when the whole school had finished makeup classes and was gradually going home, Nam was already standing at the classroom door, telling me to come with him. I still do not know whether it was pride or the desire to end the growing dread inside me. But in the end I nodded. Building C near dusk looked exactly like an abandoned place. The last sunlight never reached the end of the corridor. The old bulbs on the ceiling glowed weakly, some lit and some dark. Wind slipped through broken panes of glass, stirring the curtains so that they moved like the hem of someone's dress passing by. The deeper we went, the more unnaturally cold the air became. A damp cold that slipped through my school shirt and clung to my skin like invisible fingers. When we stopped at the girls' bathroom door, Nam still had enough nerve to grin. I was already regretting everything. Nam pushed the door open. The hinges let out a long shriek like metal scraping over bone. Inside it was dark and filthy. 4 old stalls stood motionless on the left. The wash basin stretched along the right, and on the wall in front of us was the mirror. It was long, old, slightly yellowed, with blotched stains within the silver backing like mold spreading beneath the skin of a corpse. In the lower right corner there was a hairline crack running jaggedly toward the center. For some reason, merely looking at it gave me the feeling that the mirror was not an object at all. It was more like a half-closed door. Nam switched on his phone flashlight, swept it around once, then stood in front of the mirror and made a clownish face. He even called out, "If there's a ghost here, come out." His voice echoed inside the confined space, sounding thin and strange, like someone else's voice. I grabbed his arm and told him to stop, that we should leave, but at that exact moment, the flashlight flickered. For a single heartbeat, the whole bathroom sank into darkness. And in that darkness, the mirror lit up with a dull gray radiance that seemed to come from nowhere. In the mirror, besides Nam and me, there was another figure standing between us. A very thin female student, head bowed, long wet black hair covering her face, wearing a white uniform so old that the collar had yellowed. Her arms hung limp, the fingertips unnaturally long, the nails darkened as though they had been clawing at dirty earth. In reality, there was absolutely no one standing between Nam and me. I screamed. The flashlight came back on. The figure vanished. But this time Nam did not laugh. His face had gone chalk white. His lips trembled. I knew he had seen something too, because he immediately grabbed my hand and dragged me outside. We ran down the corridor, nearly slipping on the stairs. Only when we reached the schoolyard did Nam let go. He was breathing hard and would not look back up at the third-floor windows. I asked what he had seen. It took him a long time to answer, his voice hoarse. "When the light went out, I saw a hand on your shoulder. From behind. That night, I heard the knocking at exactly 3:17. Not only the knocking, I also heard the sound of slippers scraping along the corridor outside my room. The rustle of wet cloth dragging against the wall. The sound of someone standing outside for a very long time without knocking. Only breathing in silence. I did not dare move. It was only when dawn came near and the birds began calling outside that I finally fell asleep from exhaustion. From that day on, everything changed. At first it was only very small details. I would pass a classroom window and see my reflection. But behind my shoulder there would be something darker. Some little patch like the edge of black hair just passing by. I would open my phone's front camera, and the screen would jerk, then flash a pale blurred face directly behind me before returning to normal. Once while washing dishes, I saw in the metal of a spoon a white patch like the skirt of a uniform standing behind my neck. When I turned around, there was nothing. The dreams began to come regularly. In the dreams I was always standing in the third-floor bathroom of Building C, and the mirror in front of me reflected not that room but a very narrow corridor. Dark as a drain. At the end of the corridor stood a girl with her back turned. When I looked at her, she slowly turned her head in a movement that was wrong, tilted so far that her neck was almost broken, and where her eyes should have been were only two empty sockets full of black water. Each time I woke drenched in sweat, with the feeling that something had just leaned close to my ear and whispered before I opened my eyes. Nam also began to experience things. He just hid it for a long time, until one afternoon, He pulled me behind the science room and held out his phone for me to see a photograph. It was the picture he had taken in the bathroom that day when we went up to Building C, when he had still been joking in front of the mirror. In the photo, I was standing near the wash basin, tugging at his shirt, but at the edge of the mirror, where it reflected the last stall door, a face was peering out. Chalk white, distorted, eyes opened impossibly wide, lips split too far at the corners. Beneath wet clumps of hair, the skin looked shriveled as though it had soaked too long in water. I dropped the phone. Nam said he had tried to delete the photo several times, but it always came back. Every night at 3:17, the phone lit up by itself. The wallpaper changed itself to that picture. Some nights he woke with the feeling that someone was touching the screen beside his pillow very lightly with fingernails. One tap at a time. Knock, 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 evenly, as though calling his name. The next morning, the glass screen would be covered in smeared wet handprints that he swore could not have been his. We decided to find out where the story had come from. By then, curiosity had been completely replaced by a real fear. Slimy and tangible, like black water seeping day by day into our lives. After asking around through many people, Han finally remembered Mrs. Tui, the oldest janitor in the school, who had worked there since before we were born. She stayed in a small room near the storage shed behind the sports field. The moment she heard us mention the mirror on the third floor of Building C, her wrinkled face tightened. She looked straight at us with eyes filled with both anger and fear, as if merely hearing that name was enough to break some taboo. It took a long time before she finally spoke. That year, more than 20 years ago, the school still combined middle school and high school. There was a 12th grade student named Van. Van was very beautiful and an excellent student, but quiet. Her father had died early. Her mother worked far away, and she lived with an aunt. At school, because of some romantic matter, several other girls became jealous of her. And then the rumors spread in the most vicious way schoolchildren can think of. They ruined her reputation, cursed her in class, stuffed threatening letters into her desk, wrote filthy words on the bathroom walls. Once, that group of girls dragged Van into the third-floor bathroom of Building C, locked the door, forced her to stand in front of the mirror, and made her read aloud the insults written on the glass in red lipstick. Van cried until her voice went hoarse, pounding on the door and begging to be let out. No one helped her. After that, Van changed completely. She grew frighteningly thin. Her eyes always ringed dark as if she had not slept for many nights. Several teachers had seen her standing alone for long periods in the bathroom, staring fixedly at the mirror as if hypnotized. One day Van told her homeroom teacher that there was another girl in the mirror, hair covering her face, always standing behind her and whispering in her ear to look a little longer. The teacher thought Van was suffering from nervous exhaustion and told her to rest. No one truly believed her. No one asked why a young girl had become so terrified that she no longer dared to raise her head and look at her own face in the mirror. Then, during a night of heavy rain, Van disappeared after class. People searched the whole school until late evening before discovering that the last bathroom stall on the third floor of Building C was locked from the inside. When they broke it open, they found that Van was dead. Not hanging. There was no rope, no blood, no signs of a struggle. She was sitting collapsed on the dirty tiled floor, her back against the toilet, her head thrown back, her eyes wide open. Her face had frozen in an expression that was not merely pain but absolute terror. As though in her final moment she had seen something that did not belong to the human world. The strangest thing was that the mirror outside was covered in countless dark smeared handprints. Thin and long, layered one over another from the inner surface of the glass, as though someone trapped on the other side had clawed wildly to get out. Mrs. Thai's mother had been among those who cleaned the scene that day. She had sworn that while Van's body had not yet been carried away, while everyone stood there paralyzed, she heard a faint knocking from the mirror. Not a single knock, many knocks, pounding from the inside, like the fingernails of a dozen people scraping at the glass all at once. After Van's death, everything was covered up. They concluded she had taken her own life because of a psychological crisis. Students and teachers were forbidden to speak of it. But then misfortunes began to happen to those who had to clear out the place. The worker who removed the mirrors slipped on the stairs and broke 2 fingers. A night guard saw a female student standing before the mirror in the locked bathroom. And when he came closer, she vanished. The next morning he was found dead in the guard room, his face cut by splinters of glass. In the end, the school did not dare smash the mirror. They only replaced the frame, repaired the wall, and locked the bathroom for a while. But in later years, the lock always ended up broken, and students would secretly go in again. And Van's death was never buried with her body. It remained there, or at least, whatever had come through after her death remained there. I asked Mrs. Twee how it could be ended. She looked at me for a long time and said that maybe it was already too late. Because whatever was in the mirror was not really Van anymore. It might carry Van's voice, Van's pain, Van's face, but in essence it was no longer just one ghost. Places filled with humiliation, loneliness, grief, and violent death are like cracks. Through those cracks, very evil things can crawl across. The mirror was only the doorway. Once the doorway had been opened long enough, no one could know how many things were looking through from the other side. After hearing that story, Nam fell apart visibly. He could no longer sleep. His eyes sank deep into his face. His skin turned gray, and he would start at the slightest shadow crossing a window. Once during class, while copying notes, he suddenly screamed, knocked over his chair, and bolted out of the room. I ran after him and found him in the boys' bathroom, retching over the wash basin. On the mirror, fogged with steam, a line of crooked letters had just appeared as though written by a wet finger. "Give me back my face." The moment I saw it, the letters began to run downward into long gray streaks like dirty water. Nam grabbed my shirt collar, his voice shaking. "It's not standing behind me anymore. It's standing inside the mirror looking out." I was not doing any better. Every night the knocking grew clearer. Once I woke up and saw that the mirror on my wardrobe reflected part of the room. On the bed, I was lying with my back turned, but at the edge of the bed in the mirror, someone else was sitting there. Long hair hanging down, head bowed, one hand resting on the blanket near my feet. In reality, the bed was empty. I did not dare move for almost an hour. Until daylight had fully arrived, and only then did I dare turn around and see that there was nothing there. I began covering every mirror in the house with cloth. My mother asked what was wrong with me. I could not answer. How could I explain to an ordinary person that I was afraid of an object that was supposed to reflect only myself? As time went on, the feeling that someone was following me became stronger. I did not need mirrors anymore. It was just the feeling of a heavy stare fixed right between my shoulder blades. At the nape of my neck, so cold that sometimes I imagined drops of water from someone's wet hair were falling onto my skin. Then Nam disappeared. It happened on a day of relentless rain. Nam did not come to class. I had felt uneasy since morning but still tried to think he was only sick. Near the end of the day, Han came rushing in and said that Nam's mother had just called our homeroom teacher. No one had been able to find Nam since the night before. His room had been locked from the inside. When the family forced the door open, he was gone. All the mirrors were shattered. The windows were shut tight. On the floor, among the shards of glass, there were countless wet footprints, as if someone had come in from the rain, walked around the room for a long time, and then stopped in front of the large wardrobe mirror. After that, the footprints vanished there. The instant I heard that, I knew where Nam was. I ran up to Building C through the pounding rain so hard that water splashed into the corridor. Han followed behind me, crying as she ran. The whole block was deserted. The lights flickered. When I reached the third floor, I saw that the girl's bathroom door was standing ajar. From inside came a scraping sound. Not knocking anymore. Fingernails scraping over glass. Long and dragging, shrieking in waves that made my scalp go numb. I stepped inside. The air there was colder than the rain outside. A cold that did not belong to weather, but to the inside of a morgue drawer. Nam was standing in front of the mirror with his back to the door. Barefoot, his uniform soaked with filthy water. Both arms hanging limp, the fingers twisted as if he had clawed at something until the nails had nearly torn away. At his feet, streaks of water stretched from the last stall to the wash basin. I called his name. He did not answer. I moved closer, and just as I was about to touch his shoulder, I saw that his reflection in the mirror was not the same as the real Nam. In the mirror, his head was tilted sharply to one side. A grin stretched all the way to his ears. And behind him a girl in white was pressed flat against his back as if the two had fused into one. Before I could scream, Nam slowly turned around. What turned to face me wore Nam's face. But it was no longer Nam. His pupils were clouded white. His lips were purple. The corners of his mouth were split and cracked. And when he opened his mouth, the voice that came out was that of a girl. Hoarse and wet, as if pushed upward through a throat filled with water. "You're here." I stepped back. Han screamed from the doorway. Nam, or whatever was using Nam's body, lifted an arm and pointed at the mirror. "It's been waiting for you for a long time. You only need to look a little longer." I did not want to look, but my eyes had already been drawn to it. The mirror no longer reflected the bathroom. Instead, it showed a deep black space, like another chamber existing inside the glass. Out of that darkness, the girl in white stepped forward. Every step she took made the mirror ripple like stirred pond water. Wet black hair covered her face, but between the strands one could see grayish skin, bruised dark lips, and two empty eye sockets. From those sockets, or what should have been her eyes, thick black liquid streamed down like ink. Her neck tilted sideways, making faint cracking sounds each time she moved. one hand lifted to touch the glass. The fingers were too long, the nails black, the tips smeared with something like rotting algae mixed with blood. At the same moment, in the real world, I felt the back of my neck turn ice cold. Something had come right up behind me. Before I could turn, Nam lunged and clamped both hands onto my shoulders. His strength was impossibly great. His fingers dug into my skin painfully. His face pressed close to mine, carrying the foul smell of dirty water and something decaying. That female voice hissed into my ear, sounding both pleading and cursing. "Look, change places with me. If you look long enough, I can come out." In panic, Han seized the mop leaning in the corner and struck Nam hard across the back. He staggered. I tore myself free and slammed against the wash basin. Just then I saw that in the mirror. The girl in white had pressed her face right up against the other side of the glass. Her hair slid aside, revealing the rest of her face. I nearly vomited on the spot. Half her face had no skin left at all. Only gray slimy flesh exposed beneath. Teeth clenched in a frozen grin. And where her eyes should have been were deep holes filled with tiny white things writhing like maggots. She began tapping on the glass. Slow, even, the exact sound I had heard all those nights. Knock, knock, knock. Each tap made the mirror shudder. Black cracks spread from the place where her hand touched, branching across the entire surface like veins. Nam collapsed to his knees, clutching his head and screaming in agony. Black water began pouring from his nose and mouth. Han grabbed my arm and shouted for me to run. But at that instant the arm of the thing inside the mirror suddenly pushed through the glass. It did not break the glass. It passed through it as though through water. A long white arm, joints bent backward, fingers scratching at the edge of the wash basin with a horrible squealing sound. I knew that if I stepped back one more pace, it would reach me. In desperation, my eyes swept across the room and landed on the old fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. I lunged for it and yanked it down. The arm writhed harder, as though trying to seize my ankle. A rotten, muddy stench surged into the air. Without thinking further, I hurled all my strength into smashing the extinguisher against the mirror. The sound that came out was not like glass breaking but like something alive being crushed. The mirror exploded. At the same instant, a scream tore through the air, so high-pitched it stabbed the ears. At once the scream of a young girl, the shriek of a dozen cats being strangled, and the howl of wind through narrow underground pipes. I fell to the floor, my ears ringing numb. Han dropped to her knees, clutching her head and sobbing. Nam writhed on the floor as if burning alive. In that instant among the shattered glass, I saw countless faces inside each shard. The faces of schoolgirls, men, children, people I had never met. All of them were pressed against the glass from the other side. Eyes wide open, mouths stretched wide as though screaming for help without a sound. Then they all dissolved, as if an invisible hand had wiped them away from the surface of dirty water. But before they vanished completely, I heard a voice, very faint, very sorrowful, very near. "Don't let them build the door again." Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was sitting in the corridor with my back against the wall, soaked by rain and trembling violently. Teachers, guards, the school nurse, many people surrounded us. Han sat hugging her knees, crying without sound. Nam was carried out on a stretcher, unconscious, his skin cold as if he had been soaked in water. That very night the bathroom was sealed off. The school called our parents, an ambulance, the local authorities. Of course, no one believed what we said. They said we had suffered mass panic, that Nam had fainted from exhaustion, and that I had smashed the mirror out of terror. The incident was almost immediately covered up. The students were only informed that a male student had entered a restricted area and caused an accident. Building C was closed for repairs. But there are some things that cannot be repaired. Nam stayed in the hospital for nearly a month. He woke up, but he remembered almost nothing of that afternoon. From that time on, however, he never dared look into a mirror for more than 2 seconds. The sudden sight of any reflection sent him into convulsions. Han asked to transfer to another class. As for me, I thought that once the mirror had shattered, everything would end. For the first few weeks, the knocking really did disappear. I began to sleep again, although I still startled at the sound of dripping water at night. I thought perhaps I had escaped. Until the beginning of the next semester. The school repaired the third-floor bathroom in Building C. New tiles, new paint, new lights, new wash basins, and a new mirror. Large, bright, flawless, not a scratch on it. The area was opened again as though nothing had ever happened. They worked so quickly that I had the feeling they were trying to bury everything beneath that layer of white ceramic. That was understandable. Schools are places where adults are very good at concealment. They paint the walls over and think memory will suffocate beneath it. On the first day that Building C was opened again, I stayed as far away as I could. But that afternoon, because of cleaning duty, I had to bring a broom up to the storage room on the 3rd floor. When I passed the bathroom, I had no intention of looking inside. Yet as if pulled by some invisible force, my eyes still swept across the open doorway. I saw the new mirror. And in the lower right corner of it was a thin crack like a strand of hair. I stopped dead. I knew very well that it had not been there the day before. I knew because I had been so obsessed that I had secretly glanced at it from a distance and told myself it was only a new mirror. That it had nothing to do with the old one. But now, on that shining surface, there was unmistakably a tiny crack, winding there like a black hair caught inside the glass. That night, at exactly 3:17, I woke up. My room was dark and silent. No rain, no wind. Knock. The tapping came from the mirror on my study table. I lay rigid, my blood seeming to freeze. Knock, knock. This time, along with the tapping, there was another sound, the sound of very long fingernails slowly scraping downward across the glass. Scrape, scrape, slow, calm, patient, like someone who knew their prey could no longer run. I did not dare look. I squeezed my eyes shut. But then something cold and wet touched my hair beside my ear. A breath, very light, brushed the back of my neck. I heard a voice, so faint it was almost only cold air slipping through teeth, whisper right behind me. I'm not all the way out yet. From that night on, I understood that the mirror was not the source. It was only a door. Even if you smashed one door, another could still be built. And there are things that, once they have seen your face, will not let you go just because you escaped the first place they appeared. Many years have passed now. Yet even to this day I still cannot sleep in a room with an uncovered mirror. I avoid every school bathroom, mall bathroom, train station bathroom, hospital bathroom if there is only me and a large mirror facing the door. There are mornings when I am brushing my teeth and, if I happen to raise my head too fast, I still see in the blurred space behind my shoulder a white figure standing still. Head lowered, long wet hair hanging down, patiently waiting for me to look just a little more closely. There are nights when I wake with a start and find 5 wet finger marks clearly imprinted on the cloth covering the mirror, as though someone inside had pressed a hand outward. People can say I am ill, that it is all only psychological trauma from adolescence, hallucinations after witnessing something horrifying. I have often tried to believe that myself. I have taken sleeping pills, seen doctors, tried to live like an ordinary person. But there is one thing I cannot lie to myself about. Sometimes, in crowded places, I accidentally see my reflection in someone else's eyes as they stand facing me. And deep in those tiny pupils, behind my shoulder, there is always another face. Chalk white, distorted, wet hair plastered to both cheeks. Eye sockets deep as black holes. A mouth slightly open in a waiting smile. It has never left. Perhaps it is not only at Hongban School. Perhaps places where cruel laughter echoes. Where insults are trapped inside damp tiled walls. Where tears fall with no one to defend them. Where deaths are erased from the records as though they never happened. Can all become a mirror. Every mirror is a thin layer of skin stretched between 2 sides. On this side is our world. On the other side is the place where those who have not been released, or things that were never human at all, stand crowded in silence in the darkness, pressing their faces to the glass and looking out. They do not need much. They only need one gaze returned. One moment when you accidentally look a little too long and realize that behind you in the mirror there is one more person. Just once is enough. If one day you stay late after school, the corridors are empty, the bulb at the end of the hall is flickering, and you are forced to stop by a bathroom hidden in some corner. Remember this carefully. If while washing your hands you hear a very soft knocking sound coming from the mirror, do not raise your eyes. If the back of your neck suddenly turns ice cold as though someone has just leaned close to you, do not turn around. If in the wet floor you see the reflection of an extra pair of feet that does not belong to you, do not check. Close your eyes. Step backward out of that place. Open the door, and walk away as fast as you can. Do not let curiosity hold you there for even one more second. Because the most horrifying thing is not seeing a ghost in the mirror. It is reaching the moment when you look into it and realize that the person standing there is no longer copying your movements. It will stand still. And you, outside the mirror, will be the one who begins to move more slowly.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.